Oh crap! It's streaming to the wrong channel. We're streaming to your channel, RJ. I forgot. I think is that
Oh,
okay or is that not
oh,
okay?
that's fine.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
All right. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if it's popping up in
So
there,
you
that's
were in a debate or discussion, whatever you want to call it, with an intelligent designer, John Maddox, and I watched part of that. But tell us your thoughts.
Might
Give us
want
a
to
rundown on it, RJ.
yeah. Well, it I was
might
expecting
want to change the
certain
stream name and
I was
description.
expecting certain things to be the case, which I would be getting effectively a reiteration of intelligent design talking points. And that's what I got, but not even the broad range of intelligent design talking points. It's essentially a presuppositionist information origins or bust argument, which of course that wasn't what it was framed. We weren't talking about abiogenesis, we were talking about evolution. So all the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the fossil record and the Cambrian explosion and origin of phyla and all of that got sidetracked.
He didn't care.
At,
He said
as
he
he
didn't care.
wanted to get you to that presupposition. If he can have you admit that there is an information coding system with a if-then things, and it's all stuff he's gleaned from the intelligent design literature version of genetic information, then he thinks his job is done. He has solved the problem, and he's got the air quotes God all resolved. There's no way around it. Intelligence is required. He can go home, pop the champagne cork, and that's the end of it. He never has to worry about anything after that.
Bang the
But
secretary. Yeah.
he would bring up very specific technical issues, and it was like a pulling teeth to get him to say where he's getting his sources from and whether he was ever fact checking them. And if he's talking about specific examples, what is an example of an organism where that's the case?
Mm-hmm.
And in every single instance, it suddenly is whoop, because he's never looked at it from the point of view of the individual organism and the actual topic of the paper. It's just from his presuppositional argument.
It was very intriguing. I noticed. I didn't listen for too long. I listened for maybe about half an hour because I got off work. I listened to your talk, and then I had to do some homework stuff. And it was intriguing because you're right. He had the mantra, but then as soon as you got him off, the moment you got him off the mantra, it was I don't care. I don't care. It's not relevant. It's not relevant.
I don't care. And
nothing.
You'll love this.
Which is
at
funny.
one point when he started going on and on about light and photosynthesis and quantum elements, I asked him because it suddenly reminded me of somebody.
Yeah, it does.
And I says, have you studied anything of the writings of James Cole? And he said, yes.
Ooh, big.
Ooh, indeed.
That's
so
a big
now
oof.
I knew exactly where he was trawling some of his weird disconnected mess from.
It makes sense then why 2 and 2 weren't coming together then if you're which is interesting because he said at one point he read like 300 books, but then every time you tried to make him talk about something specific, he said I don't care.
Don't care. Well, and if you and he's illustrating my point is that's why intelligent design has contributed zip to anything. It's because they can't get past that superficial mantra. They can't get past the hypothetical jujitsu argument for, we've disproven it, just like James Cole keeps on thinking that somehow or other, because organisms react to light, that therefore Genesis, and he never has to worry about anything else. So it was kind of funky. Several people in the questions tried to get him to pay attention to source issues, and he basically acknowledged, yeah, I know that's your thing. Yeah, it's my thing.
Did you guys get a lot of questions fielded?
Oh yeah, actually, although most of them were fielded at John,
Sure.
I got one or two of them in there. None of them that I weren't able to handle, and I tried to open up the field by answering the questions he was asked. Sometimes he would just kind of go, yeah, I don't know, I don't care. And then I would actually discuss the topic.
I don't care. It's the bonus track on Ken Hoven's album. I was prepared for that.
Since you were there, I think for the whole thing,
I was
TV,
there for
did I equip myself well on every point?
Oh, you kept him pinned down. From what I saw from the hour of it.
Yeah, it was a fascinating experience. There was no surprises in there. I wrote down some notes that I'll want to look at. I was just looking up translational pausing, so I pretty well tracked down the paper that he was discussing, that he was quote mining from. And it's a okay paper. As far as I can tell, there's been no stampede of people citing it. And translational pausing pops up in a lot of different things. There's been things at PNAS. Apparently, the regular scientists don't know that this is somehow a terrible thing for evolution because they seem to continue to do work and publish in the field.
It was kind of intriguing the way he described alternative splicing, because he kept calling it something else, like double usage or something like that. It kind of reminded me of the way that Snelling refers to the sequences. What is it? Where you have like you have the large sequences that are like the ocean coming in and going back out to the coastal sequences, but he calls them mega sequences, but that won't really turn up much if you type it in.
So they deliberately are using terminology that will channel you to their apologetics if you try to Google it. The dual gene thing, I'm sure, is a fascinating subject, and I bet all the information that I cull from this, I'll put the links up, and we'll deal with it in an upcoming evolution hour, because one does not want to not follow up on these things. Some of us have curiosity.
Yeah, it's his huge point about these things can be described in mathematical terms, ergo God. I mean, my thinking was, okay, you can describe the structure of a crystal in terms of mathematics, but we know how crystals naturally form. So what? You know?
I was curious to find out how much of the big map of time he was aware of, and apparently it's nothing.
Yeah, I heard the I don't believe in Luca, which is interesting because he's an idea, and so I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, in principle, nothing about, especially if he's not necessarily objecting to a common descent, as Michael B. he supposedly does, and Michael Denton, that they would have no principal problems. A designer shouldn't have intrinsically a problem with Luca. It just focuses the thing that's designed. But the fact that when he couldn't commit to anything being alive now descended from something in the Cambrian, that's why my egg roll is just warmed up. I'm going to step away for just a few seconds.
Oh my goodness, his egg roll. I guess we'll have to. TD Lane, do you do juggling?
I don't have a webcam. And also no.
Yikes. Well, I guess we can't distract them with our juggling. Hello, everyone in the chat. Hello,
I do have
Brian,
it. I got a pretty nifty pocket watch.
And Sean W.
Natural History Museum while I was there.
And Beach 8.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, that was a... He kept saying he wanted to talk about evolution, but kept bringing up how life started. Yeah, I noticed that. The talk
Origins or bust.
Yeah, the talk was about evolution, and yet he never even really discussed... Everything about evolution was irrelevant. I don't care. That's all I heard.
You could tell when I got the evolution, he didn't actually have anything other than genetic entropy, I guess. Because he seemed to allude to that.
There we go.
Got
my
some
egg roll.
tasty noms.
Well, I needed a little bit of an after snack to resolve this little matter. It wears me out, young man. It wears me out to deal with such stupid.
You know,
I don't have a webcam, Sean. I can't.
I haven't.
I can put a picture up later on my Twitter. It's actually really gorgeous.
Modern Day's channel in a while. I don't know. I guess I'm not a debate person anymore. So.
Well, the thing that I wanted, for one thing, I wasn't terribly concerned that he was going to be able to blindside me with a heck of a lot of material that I wasn't already familiar with, because I read probably more of the material than he has. And
that's probably true.
The stuff that he has bumped into are all generic books. And when I asked him, he sounded like, yeah, I fact-checked Denton, but yet you couldn't get him to explain an example of it. I think that's probably the same point, is that he can't apply any of his stuff to alus or genomes bit.
Right. Yeah, I definitely did notice that, and it's, I don't know, just if you've read 300 books, which does that necessarily mean they're all related to this topic?
If you've read 300 wrong books, you have read 300 wrong books.
But well, he did say, he said, I've read Dawkins. He was like, I've read both people. Okay, then why are you so uninterested in this topic you've read 300 books about? For goodness sakes.
And for one thing, presumably the books and how does he actually keep count? I actually do keep count of the stuff. So I keep track of, well, in terms of technical papers, I functionally have a listing of the stuff that I've dealt with in there. Many of the works that I have, the ones that are off on the back burner, are precisely the generic books. By books, he might refer to the stuff I'm worried that some of the books he's read are in fact the books whose authority quotes he has borrowed that were taken from them. And so he may, if he mistakenly thinks that he understands the material in the whole book because he's read a snippet of it, yeah. But Douglas Axe's book is a very superficial one. It's in the same category as Jensen and Tompkins. I mean, these things are ones where when you actually start looking at the technical documentation, oh, they're pretty thin. And yeah. Denton and Behe and Steve Meyer, actually, in terms of just documentation, are much juicier. And they're at a higher end because they're making specific arguments, citing specific literature in detail. And that's their undoing, because that's sort when of. You start looking at the specific examples and finding out, yeah, it's not quite what you meant on that kind of a thing. But you know, there's no way that you can get around a jujitsu argument. This is like Euler trying to prove God by putting e to the pi power plus 1 equals 0 up on the board and daring anybody to argue with him on it. Well, yeah, it's true. So if you agree that e to the pi power plus 1 equals 0, then God, and there it is, all done.
Yeah, it was very interesting because the ability to describe something mathematically therefore means God. Well, sorry?
Yeah, it was interesting that I was trying to probe some of the things he was bringing up related directly to codon reassignments. And you'll notice how he did not exactly dive into that subject with relish, because other than just the authority quote blip, I think that's all he has. I don't think he studied the background context of it.
I must have left before or after that part, because like I said, I watched
the irony was it was literally fresh in my mind because that's in the appendix.
Yeah, the dang epilogue that you wrote.
That little itty bitty little thing that started out as just a chart.
There's a line between appendix. Appendix. I'm fine calling the philo one an appendix, but yeah. For God's sakes,
it's over 20 pages long. Yes.
Yeah, the amino acid one's over 20 pages. I was like, what?
This is an appendix, yeah, boy. But it just kind of grew like Topsy. But I'm terribly delighted with it because it's remarkably appropriate.
It is
as it turns out.
Yeah.
Because it's directly hitting the whole issue about just exactly how designy is that genetic code and those codons. And he was still repeating that idiotic mantra that there's no chemical association between amino acids and nucleotides. This is just weird. And
do you mean what do you mean? Like
that the association between particular nucleotides and particular amino acids in the code is absolutely arbitrary. That's the claim of the intelligent design movement. That it's utterly arbitrary that a GCU should assign to a particular amino acid. And there's no indication that that's the case. There is a certain amount of chanciness to how some of the ones associated, precisely because some of the associations are so fluid. That's why you get the varying codon assignments. Others seem to be kind of monotonously like that. Those with serine. When you look at the chart, I had a chart that I had printed up. I printed up that chart and took it as a lecture piece because I was telling my club out there, our secular club, we had a meeting and I was giving them a little upbeat thing about, the appendix and that, and giving a little heads up about the book and all that. And let me see if I can share here. In my screen.
Do tell.
And if you're now seeing,
we are
here.
Let's see. It says you're reviewing RJ's screen, but we're not.
Oh, I'm probably doing stop the share. Okay, I'll stop share. Anyway, we came up with a listing of the amino acids by how many codon assignments were associated with them.
Actually, RJ, let me see if I can. No, I can't do it.
No big deal.
Okay.
Anyway, some of them have 6 codons, and what's so glaring, for example, arginine, which is kind of thought to be one of the later hangers-on in the genetic system, every single one of their codons has been reassigned by some organism over time. Every one of them. Whereas serine None of them have. And they can actually figure out, as we discussed in the book, in that little teeny bitty appendix, that there's an actual reason why that's the case. And so simply to talk about an amino acid codon assignment without being context sensitive about how it interconnects with the literature and what the scientists have been working out as to how it dynamically fits with the transferases and what odds there are that a particular mutation can alter the transferase at the wobbling third codon and blah, blah, blah. There's a huge amount of material on that, of which none of it will have shown up in the intelligent design literature that he might have copied from, and hence none of it's showing up in his brain pan. Because I don't think he's going to find a lot of this information by reading a Richard Dawkins book.
Oh, heck
a lot
no.
of these things.
Oh, heck no.
He thinks he understands the field because he reads generic works that are, at best, bumping into elements of the field, but not in any great detail.
Dawkins is... when I think of, like, I think of The Selfish Gene was very thick, but it wasn't thick because he was delving into the genetic aspects so much. It was
just wordy.
He was making big deals about these examples of, like, these big examples that he can point to and the metaphors and all that. And so that's what made it long and wordy, not that he was really looking at the exact, nucleotides.
No, I've never been overly intimidated by the reference listings in a Dawkins book. They're perfectly fine, but they're not. You get a little bit more anal retentive when you move over into Stephen Jay Gould's big book. That monstrosity has just a huge reference base. It's monstrous.
Which reminds me, I was telling you my thoughts about Wonderful Life in our.
Oh yes, we want to talk about that. That's great.
I think I do want to say, as a historical piece, I think it is still very good, still very useful as a what were they thinking at the time sort of thing. I think some of his points are well received. I like his idea on contingency. I agree 100%. I think he's right on contingency. I think Conway Morris is out there with his contingency ideas. But then, as I said, the Burgess isn't as disparate as it was once thought. Turns out most things are less weird.
And remember, 1989, homeobox genes hadn't actually been discovered yet.
That's true.
And so you get a different perspective even in Gould's giant book. T.D. Lane, do you have any idea what the hell we're talking about here?
Oh, no, because I haven't read anything of what Gould did.
Stephen Jay Gould wrote a delicious little book, which Jackson can agree with me on, is well worth reading, even though it was written long before you were a fetus,
it's
around 1989. It's called Wonderful Life, and it's about the Burgess Shale Cambrian explosion fossils that were just coming up on the scope at that time. There was a major bunch of reevaluation. The fossils had kind of been put into a bin because one of the discoverers of it, and that's going all the way back to 1910. This is all that historical stuff. It's all old things. Walcott, who was one of the discoverers on there, and one of the things that Gould complained most about is that he was trying to shoehorn everything into existing forms.
Right.
So he would just cram everything into particular categories that were
Marilla
living animals. The idea,
crab.
the idea that you could have a group of phyla that are completely extinct, gone, kaput, poof, and that had their say and did their thing and disappeared completely was not something that was conceptually easy in that ladder of progress notion that Walcott had. And although there has been some consolidation since, nonetheless, I don't think you will find any paleontologist who would disagree with the idea that there are more animal phyla present in the Cambrian than there were later on, because many of them just faded out.
Here's the thing. I did actually delve into some technical literature, and the researchers seem to think that the amount of disparity in the Cambrian is equal to that of today's animal disparity.
Well, the amount of disparity between, I would tend to agree on that.
I mean, you have things like hylids and halkyariids, which are no longer around, sure.
Yeah, so some of the phyla, the other issue is that we can't tell how busy they were for a long period of time. We know my little favorite is little Marella, that is mentioned in the book because he points out that Marella is really common in the Burgess Shale section, except up the slope they disappear practically, and they're almost completely rare. So that means we're looking at a narrow ecological range in a community that is common in one area but not in another. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of ecological niches, the details of which we can only imagine because we don't have a time machine to go back and look of what was going on in the benthic thing. But Morella, almost alone of all those weird little ones, actually did a evolutionary thing, and in the last 10 years or so they have found morellamorphs that have survived all the way into the Ordovician, modified. There's evolution again. And we can presume, even though all of them are extinct, you could practically sell your grandmother on the certainty that they're going to have homeobox genes, and that's what generated them. And they're probably very closely related because it's a little buggy looking thing, that the systems, they would be a protostome format, and they would be using comparable mixes of homeobox genes to what you're going. By the way, Morella is only about like the A bigs.
Oh yeah, everything in the
Like
Burgess
everything
Shale
in the
is on
Cambrian.
the order of inches.
Except for like things like Anomalacars that's like 3 feet long. You know, that's the monster of the seas.
Things that are as big as your hand are on the larger side of things, and things that are as big as your arm are giant. And you have Anomalacars, which is basically the mosasaur of its day.
Yeah. The thing about, I would have liked have poor Maddox shown the curiosity of a block of wood. I would have liked to have asked them about more of those map of time issues.
Right.
Because I know that when it comes to describing what things were and how big they were and what their relationships are to anything or nothing and how they fit into the systematics of intelligent design, which they never do, it's a fog bank. And therefore Maddox, who comes already pre-adapted to have lack of curiosity, relies on a group of people who are not curious for him. So that filters yet more of the data field out of it. But still, the fact remains you have to account for it. And for him to start waving material, I was trying to also get into the idea, was this transitional pausing thing the same in all organisms, or does it vary between bacteria and eukaryotes? And
I do remember you saying a bit about that, and he said, I don't know. I mean, it's fair to not. It's fair to not know. There's plenty we don't know, but
on a subject you yourself brought up, that when quizzed about it, you suddenly go into,
it's not relevant to my. Nothing is relevant to my argument except what I say.
Except a tiny little narrow box in it, and that what I was attempting to do, I was channeling you, sir. That just as what you did with Standing for Truth, when you would be trying to pin him down as to how to apply these ideas to actual examples, I was trying to do the same thing. And it was like nailing Jell-O to a wall. It was just absolutely, you couldn't get anything out of it. And I think other than his partisans that were in the live feed, I think I was getting a pretty good reaction from the ones in the discussion. They were going, okay, here we go.
Yeah, Erica was there for a little while. I saw her in there. I saw a couple of other regulars. But overall, aside from a few known creationists.
And Mr. ID, Mr. Intelligent Design was there. Bless his sweet little clueless heart.
Christ, that man is a
there was somebody in there that said that if viruses evolved, then we'd all die.
Yeah, Dustin, he's another one. He's
natural
another one
selection would select for individuals with fair immune systems. Because, people with bad immune systems wouldn't survive.
They what was it? Was it the H1N1? There have been a bunch of studies on how that gave birth to a whole host of daughter viruses over time. So they totally
everything
don't
is a lineage, and if you have no curiosity, which John doesn't, therefore all the organisms on the planet, think about this, all of them are just now disconnected blips, where he's sure that nothing is related to anything because you couldn't get him to pin down whether anything was related to anything or anything was descended from anything, and certainly that we're not from bacteria. The irony being that he would be hard pressed to justify that on a purely intelligent design argument.
Right.
Because all the best you can do with that argument that he was making was that somehow the original organism was a designy thing. Well, then what happens? And if he says, I'm okay with evolution, but you can never pin him down as to what he means by it. No, this is an avoidance mechanism. It's not an explanation.
That's exactly how my talk went. With Fazal Rana went, it's, things are related in a phylum, But not other things, and not that, and also not that, and not that. It's like, okay, well, what is then?
What is? And therein is one of their little blind spots. If they want to be a designer, go ahead, grab it by the balls, and work out your bloody model.
If only we could. That'd get his
That you
attention.
want to say, okay, here's, if you accept speciation, you apply it. So you work out how much of the fossil record is examples of natural speciation events within your concept. What design events are there? What are the putative design elements? What's happening with that design element? Is it lineage specific? Exactly what's going on. But no intelligent design advocate ever gets that far. And I can guarantee you, Maddox is never going to get even behind the curve. He's just basically trailing along behind the non-moving caboose of intelligent design.
I did send because you mentioned the Cambrian. I had mentioned to Fazal Rana a few weeks ago if he would be interested in talking about the Cambrian explosion, and I just sent, and then I got buried in school stuff, and so I haven't.
Now, well, if anything
since.
transpires on it,
But
you count me in. You know
I did ask James if he had anyone who would be interested in talking about the Cambrian explosion, and he said Maddox might be interested. To which I was like, but
in what
would he,
possible
though?
way?
Yeah,
A man who, by his own admission, has zero interest in, let alone familiarity with, anything in the fossil record.
He
do
would
a crash course in one fell swoop.
He would probably think the lecture I listened to today was boring, and that was one of the most informative lectures I've ever listened to.
The thing too, I
I
tried
should
to
probably
show.
give some context for this. Dr. Robert, if I can find his last name, because Robert Gaines did a lecture for the Paleo Society I'm part of. It was extremely interesting, and it was on the newer Burgess Shale deposits that he has been working on for the past several years.
Is it Burgess Shale
look up the
deposits or Burgess type deposits?
Yeah, it's same formation as the Burgess Shale. It's 30 miles south of it.
Okay. Whoops, we have
Yeah,
10 minutes, my dudes.
Oh, yeah. There's a 2014 paper by him on Nature Communications on a new phyllopod bed-like assemblage from the Burgess Shale of the Canadian Rockies. So that'll be open access.
That's neat.
And then I got some 2003 paper he did with Mary Drosser, Paleoecology of the familiar trilobite, an early exoaerobic zone inhabitant. So the answer is yes, I'm aware of his work.
Yeah. And while I was there, I brought Evolution Shem Thunk with me, so I showed that.
Ooh, and what reaction did you get? If any?
I got a few people interested.
Now, I hope
Nice.
something comes of that. I also
including
wanted to
Dr. Gaines.
show by my
and I
geekiness.
suggested he get in contact with you and come on the show sometime.
Yeah.
No, I'd be delighted. Absolutely. Yeah. And since I'm already aware of his work, we'll just have a delightful brain pick if he responds on that. When they brought up Io Andromeda, I was happy that I was able to recall that in the context of it. And poor old Maddox was completely at sea on it. He had no idea what she was talking about. And whereas I could actually discuss the context of the bloody little thing directly.
What is it?
It's the very first ctenophore. It goes back to the Precambrian. They've just found the fossils on that. I had it in the
Io Andromeda. I have not
Io
heard
Andromeda. Yeah, it's listed in the as the technical literature, I believe, for that bit on my chart, and I had it right in front of me because I had printed up this chart for the little lecture that I gave at the club. So it's the reason why it gets a little trace fossil node for the Precambrian.
Is this
Io Andromeda?
Well, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's not certain whether it, but there's an argument that's made, so I haven't listed it as a possibility.
I mean, there's also, I think, is Stromativarus, I think, which is Precambrian and has been claimed by some as a possible ctenophore, although that is also disputed.
Again, it's difficult at times because when it's been squished and it's not in a Lagerstätten context, it's tricky.
Right.
But then, of course, we can easily use Maddox's approach is I don't care.
The earliest ctenophores, I believe, are like Middle Cambrian. There's this group of armored ctenophores
Yeah, they're definitely there by the Cambrian, even though there's some of the little, or in comb jellies, Ctenophores comb jellies.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a different array of their little ciliate things.
Yes,
That's
they're
distinct from the ones that we see later.
the
More of that
ones.
evolution thing.
Yeah, the modern ones have 8 rows of cilia, which have the colloblasts on them. But the ancient ones have varying numbers of rows of cilia, which kind of makes sense.
Immediately implies things about the regulatory genetics that you can theoretically paleogenomic analysis in future, and it's only a matter of time, which I'm sure will not garner the interest of John Maddox.
Probably not. Yeah, they're yeah, there are a couple of different ones, but they're armored, which is also kind of intriguing because they're all squishy today.
Yeah, so and you'll notice I was constantly asking for sources and wanting specific examples and wanting to write down all of that relevant information, and Maddox was never doing that. He had no interest whatsoever to expand his little box out to anywhere, to the thing outside of his little jujitsu argument. That's all he's got to do is drag me onto that presuppositional frame.
But it's program, RJ. It's a program. Don't you know that? It's a program.
Well, he was reading off, and a rather tendentious one at that. You know, I felt I was. I felt so violated, so naked, that he was telling me what it is I was going to be thinking and saying before I even say it. Well, how dare you put words in my mouth? It's unsanitary.
He was he had the other thing, I guess, that really
5 minutes to end time.
Oh, well, I'll make it quick. The other thing that really got me about the conversation was the arrogance of his tone, his candor of speech was it was just hard to listen to him. Like, I don't think I could listen to him do a video just talking.
Well, I have no problem with somebody condescending me if they know more than I do.
Well,
but
that's
if
precisely
they don't
why.
know than I do, no, that ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, he had this tone of arrogance, and yet it was I don't care, and so that was hard to listen to.
And indeed but the attitude that John is pointing out is exactly what you see across the board in that intelligent design old earth creationist framework. They have their little mantra bits that they can latch on to as a thing to prove the thing that they already know must be true because they presupposed it to be true, and they're not going to accept anything to the contrary. And of course, the fact that he was trying to make it a religion issue, the origin of life matter can occur as a completely natural phenomenon, independent of whether or not there's a God.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. I didn't realize he was trying to make it a religion issue. Was he?
Oh, well, he was mentioned specific God. I tried to, at one point, I asked him how many designers there were, and he never really addressed that point.
There's only one RJ.
How do you tell one designer from multiple designers? Are you really telling me the Ediacara, biota, and dinosaurs are designed by the same designer? But the design criteria never gets that detailed.
Oh, heck no.
Very little. You've seen in Darwin's Doubt that you don't see a hell of a lot about the Animalia in terms of what a non-designed version would look like.
Yeah, is it the same designer, who made chordates and also Morella? If these are very different, Pikaia is very different from Morella. So if it's a common designer for the common differences, is it different designers for the different?
Pikaia and Haikuella and Kathy Miras and all the rest look pretty much like what evolutionists were expecting really early chordates to look like. Isn't that surprising?
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's there was Zongziniscus, which is intermediate between Cathemiris and I think Malacanmingia, and so you even have the squishy things, which are intermediate between the other squishy things.
Because whatever you can detect about them, you can start looking at characteristics, and you find almosts and nearly thises and practically that's all through the fossil record. But if you never look, then you don't have to worry about those things because you're like John Maddox. I don't care.
Sure, yeah, that's true. Yeah, all the little stem vertebrates and stem chordates and early deuterostomes like Vetulicolians and things like that.
Yeah, and so we're supposed to give up all the science work that we can see relating to all that data field because he's got his little jujitsu argument that allows us to disappear it all. And yet, you want to bring your magic Spurgle onto the field without defending it in turn, because even if we accepted a design argument, we didn't even get to that level that I could have pointed out to him. We can rule out the God of Abraham, because the God of Abraham Genesis account does not in any way whatsoever match up with what we could actually see in the fossil record. You do not have the sun and the moon and the stars being made after plants. Sorry.
What? But if you squint one eye and squint the other and kind of flip the book
if you want to
upside down.
rewrite the test, then fine. And so that's the problem facing you, Ross. That's the ones. I mean, at least Kent Hovind and Ken Ham bite their bullet and jump off the gangplank into the empty pool full bore by just saying it doesn't matter. The sun and the moon and the stars really were made after plants.
It was a perfect storm in a teacup.
Resolve that. At least they're consistent. But all the other ones that just don't think about it or just go, okay.
Yeah. At any rate, so I'm glad you had a
Down
good
to
time,
last
RJ.
minute.
Yeah. Did you have a good time, RJ?
I did. So, and TD, did you feel that I looked like I was having a good time?
Oh, you looked like it.
He was having trouble with his signal, and his picture would fade out every once in a while, and his audio jammed up and all of that. But it didn't help him any when he started to get back in the field, because he didn't say any more with the audio on than he did without it.
Well,
as I said, ID Kent Hovind.
Oh well.
Nothing but the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. His presupposition, he's like Nephilim, free.
We're about to get booted.
Kind of thing.
We're about to get booted. So anyways.
We're about to get booted. Well, thank you all for the after show.
Thanks for the
Machine
show,
God
RJ.
willed that we no longer get a meeting. So
RJ, you need to change the title of this video.
Oh.
It's got the wrong title.
Yeah, I'll have to go in and
Bye,
edit
everybody.
it and revamp.